The thing about security clearance work that I think makes it a little cleaner and clearer than most court case type work is that you don't have to dig through hundreds or thousands of cases. You don't have to find the perfect case in a certain state to make your argument. It's all black and white. The adjudicative guidelines, there's 13 of them. It tells you what you can do to mitigate the concerns.
Good afternoon, good morning, depending on which time zone you're in. I'm Kathleen with ClearedJobs.Net, and I love our podcast because it means I get to spend some special time with my dear friend, Rachel. Rachel, how are you today?
So good and so glad to be here. So, Kathleen, would you please tell us who else is on the show today?
Well, it's another one of our special episodes where we get to focus on an issue that is near and dear to everyone's hearts, their security clearance. And we have a special guest that comes in all the time to really share with us everything that everyone needs to know about the security clearances. And today we're going to be talking about when you should be disclosing certain things. So to guide us through all of these intricacies, we are welcoming our security clearance expert, Tony Kuhn. Tony is the managing partner of Tully Rinckey PLLC, an Army veteran and a reservist. He's really super great at helping everyone navigate those sort of difficult issues that we may misunderstand frequently with our security clearances. So, Tony, with a great big welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
So, Tony, I'm just going to jump right in. Sometimes the people we marry do things that don't make us happy, but that's a whole different podcast. So, as a cleared professional or a service member, do we need to report anything that our spouse is doing that might be facing criminal charges? And if so, what is the best strategy?
We do. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for adjudicators to impute the spouse's relations onto the security clearance holder. It just depends on the circumstances. So, there are going to be some circumstances where a spouse might get in trouble with the law and it won't be reportable. Maybe they got into some trouble. Maybe they got a DWI, or it could be disorderly conduct violations, things of that nature, things that aren't going to be serious infractions. Those types of things won't be reportable because they don't really affect the character of the security clearance holder or bring into question their reliability or trustworthiness. But there are some instances where the adjudicator is going to take issue with some of the spouse's activities. If the spouse, for example, is involved in anything drug related, and that could include marijuana, I know it's been a hot topic for quite a while now. But if the spouse is involved in possessing, using, distributing, investing in marijuana, things of that nature, then the security clearance holder would have to report that information and is actually jeopardizing their security clearance. There are other, alcohol-related firearms, things of that nature. The more serious concerns, immigration is one that comes up often. So if a spouse is here illegally, or if an individual is looking to get married to someone who is here illegally, especially with the changeover in administration, that's going to be a hot topic. It always has been and probably will be more so in the next few years here. So those types of things are reportable, and clearance holders really have to be careful about those types of issues. We've had a few recent cases. I had one where a spouse used medicinal marijuana, and as you know, the federal government doesn't recognize medicinal marijuana. We litigated the case through a response to a statement of reasons and then went to a hearing. We had a lot of issues in that hearing because the spouse was using marijuana in the home, possessed marijuana in the home, was on medical marijuana, and our client had not so recent, but a history of marijuana use, and the judge took issue with the fact that what they considered to be criminal behavior was taking part in the house with the security clearance holder, and the judge denied the security clearance as a result.
So it can be very tricky. And as you said, the marijuana issues has been one that's caused many people challenges. I remember being on many a different chat where people are like, it's okay in my state. And I'm like, yeah, but it's federal. And, so thank you for reiterating and reminding people that this is a tricky issue and we really need to walk the fine line. So mental health issues, thankfully, are not being as stigmatized as they used to be. But we need to sort of walk again another fine line with what cleared professionals should and should not be disclosing if they're in, say, therapy or if they're in marriage counseling. So what are some of the issues that we should be concerned about with therapy?
So not all therapy, not all mental health related treatment is reportable. there are situations where individuals might seek counseling or treatment for marital counseling. For example, there are service members and veterans and first responders and other people who may suffer from PTSD and similar conditions and seek treatment for those conditions. Those aren't all reportable. The SF-86 is very clear on the questions that they want responded to or the information that they're looking for. And then you can also review SEAD 3 and SEAD 4, SEAD 3 and 4, to see what information might be reportable. But marriage counseling, in most cases, counseling for PTSD and traumatic experiences, things of that nature, that information is not going to be reportable. But what the adjudicator is going to be interested in is certain types of diagnoses. If you look at DSM-5, there's a list of diagnoses in there, but diagnoses like bipolar, autism, things of that nature, the adjudicator is going to want to know, do these conditions exist? Is there a diagnosis for those conditions? And if so, does it make the clearance holder or applicant more or less reliable or trustworthy? And what is the prognosis for those conditions? Is it good? Is it favorable? Is there a good chance that those conditions aren't going to affect that individual in the future? So that's all going to be looked at. And then also along those same lines, there are other diagnoses like alcohol use disorder, certain alcohol and drug related diagnoses that are going to be a problem. So if there is treatment for those reasons, maybe inpatient treatment for addiction, things of that nature, those issues are going to be reportable. Doesn't necessarily mean the clearance holder is going to lose their security clearance automatically. There's an opportunity to mitigate those concerns. And the way that you do that is with a good, well-written self-report. So you don't want to just call your security officer and say, hey, I've been smoking marijuana or using cocaine, or I have a bipolar diagnosis and I'm seeking treatment for it. You don't want to do it that way, because what's going to happen is the individual who receives that phone call, they're going to interpret that information based on their life experience and their opinion of those different issues. And that's the information that's going to be relayed. And it's not always accurate. It's usually not accurate. So what you want instead is you want a good, well-written self-report for two reasons. One, you get to create a record that you reported the issue. So if anyone ever comes back and tries to allege a Guideline E violation for intentionally omitting the information, you can say, no, here's my self-report. I self-reported it. And there's no question about it. You can deal with that issue easily. But second, because you want to control the narrative. As I said already, you want to present the facts in the light most favorable to you. You want to add in mitigation. You want to help convince whoever's reading this self-report that you're not a risk and that you are trustworthy and you are reliable and that you're taking the appropriate action and you're acting responsibly given the circumstances to attempt to resolve whatever those concerns are. So before you report, make sure that you're reporting information that is actually reportable, and don't just do it with a telephone call. Make sure that you put together a well-written self-report and that you check the boxes and include mitigation so they don't jeopardize your security clearance moving forward.
So I just pop in on one question. You make it sound like there's a form somewhere that we can download for self-report. Is that true, or is this a Microsoft Word document that we're making up?
So there's no form for a self-report. There's no
Okay.
there's no right or wrong way of doing it. But in my opinion, as an attorney, I would advise that you write a well-written legal brief. You want to go through the elements that could potentially result in a revocation of a security clearance and make sure that you provide mitigation to refute or respond to each of those elements or considerations that the government's going to look at.
And I know you've said this several times, and I really, really appreciate it, because I think sometimes a cleared professional might get sort of nervous or scared, like, oh my God, I've got to report this. And in their very great intention, they call their officer and they start saying something. They're like, oh, this happened, this happened, this and happened. And I have so appreciated over the time that you've been on the podcast that you've clearly said, that person that you're reporting this to has their own narrative based on their own experience, based on the movies that they've watched, the experiences they've had, and they will then interpret what you are telling them into something different. And so I think this is just such a key golden nugget that's hidden in every single one of our interviews, that you say, write it out. Write it out what it is that you're declaring and listing what you're doing to mitigate it, and that this is, your record that you're doing it. Don't call your buddy the FSO. Write it out and make sure that it's clear. So
Yeah, you never know what the person's life experience is or how they're going to perceive the information that you provide. I'll give a couple examples. I mean, you could be self-reporting over the phone to a security officer that you got a DWI this weekend. And it might not be a big deal. That security officer might have been out drinking this weekend and got away with one and didn't get a DWI. Or that security officer could have had a sister who was killed in a DWI. So you don't know what the life experience of that security officer is. So you don't know how they're going to perceive that information and then relay that information. So you don't want to make them a middleman. You just want them to be the person who's handing your self-report to the people that are going to review it.
Absolutely. No, great advice. Appreciate that. So I'm going to hit you with another one. I feel like you're ready for this one. So let's say I was previously terminated or fired from a job, whether it was a cleared position or non-cleared position. Do I have to tell people?
You do. For the
Oh.
application process, you'll be asked during the completion of the SF-86 whether you have received certain types of counselings, reprimands in the workplace, and whether you've been terminated from other positions in the past. And if you say no to that information, you are creating a textbook guideline-y allegation or violation. And the language there is that you have intentionally omitted information. When you intentionally omit information, it's very difficult to overcome that in the future. So if you've used marijuana, we can come up with a whole bunch of different forms of mitigation. We can have you go to treatment, complete some courses, get an evaluation from a medical professional saying that you don't have any type of addictions. There's all these different things that we can do for each guideline. Guideline E is the toughest to mitigate. If you intentionally omit information, the only reason that usually exists is because you wanted the job. You were dishonest. So it's very difficult to overcome that because the question is whether you're trustworthy or reliable. So you definitely have to provide that information during the application process. If you don't provide that information during the application process, there's a really good chance that information is going to be discovered at some point, and you're going to lose your clearance and your job as a result. So you want to self-report that information, as we discussed. Maybe try to come up with a reason, a logical explanation for why you left that information out. Maybe you misunderstood a question, or more commonly, sometimes we'll see attorneys or applicants whose attorneys provided bad information to them or bad guidance to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be an attorney. It could be just an advisor. Somebody provided bad information and the applicant acted on that bad information. If we can make that argument, that's an effective argument in many cases. But you want to self-report, you want to do it in writing, and you want to make sure that you mitigate the concerns as best you can. Because if that information is discovered, and it usually is, then that clearance holder is going to lose their clearance.
Mitigation, mitigation, mitigation. There is always mitigation as long as you've self-reported and you've made your own record. So another scenario here. I'm a cleared professional, and I just received a statement of reasons outlining why my access to classified information is in question. First, talk a little bit about what the statement of reasons, or SOR, means for my career. And then what is the timeline and process to make sure that it's resolved?
Sure. There's a lot to unpack there. So you might come to work and get an email that this information has come to light under continuous evaluation or continuous monitoring, and they want you to answer some questions. We call those written interrogatories. So if that happens, that's not an SOR yet. You have an opportunity to respond to those questions and, again, attempt to mitigate the concerns. If you do a really good job responding to those written interrogatories, then you might not get a statement of reasons. If you don't do a good job, or if it's serious enough, they'll jump straight to a statement of reasons. You'll get that statement of reasons, and typically you have 30 days to respond. During COVID, they just extended that out to 60 days in most cases. But regardless, if you just request another 30 days, they will almost always grant, and that can usually be done at the local office, another 30 days. So you'll get 60 days to respond to that statement of reasons in most cases. You'll have that time to gather all your mitigation, your character references, respond to the specific concerns that are alleged, and try to build in mitigation into your response. Again, a well-written response. So you'll have security officers say, right, I admit or I deny. I've seen them tell people to write it right on the statement of reasons. That's not going to get you anywhere. So you want a well-written legal brief, good mitigation built in. A good response to a statement of reasons should be probably 50 to 150 pages, depending on how many allegations are made within the statement of reasons. So you want a really good response to that statement of reasons. But you're going to chew up to 60 days before you ever even complete and submit your response. So that's 2 months. In most cases, the clearance holder will continue to work the job that they're in while this gets adjudicated. In some cases, they might get sent home because maybe they are an applicant and not actually a clearance holder, or maybe the allegations are so egregious that they send the clearance holder home or the applicant home until the adjudication is complete. In some cases, it's such a serious offense, it becomes more of a suitability issue than a security clearance issue, and they'll suspend the clearance and send the individual home, maybe even terminate the individual. But we try to get the sponsor or the employer to hang on until we're done with the adjudication, even if it's in an unpaid status. Just give us the chance to continue to adjudicate, because if you lose your sponsor, then it doesn't matter if you respond to the statement of reasons. In most cases, they won't continue the adjudication. But you've got usually about 60 days before you submit your response. If you're successful just on the response to the statement of reasons, then it might take just a few more months and you could have your security clearance. It was never actually revoked, but you could continue with your security clearance as quickly as just a couple of months if you submit a really good response and the allegations aren't that serious. In some cases, like Department of Energy, for example, they will make you choose between a response to the statement of reasons, which they call something else, but it's the same thing, or you have to elect a hearing. You get one or the other. Most agencies allow you 2 bites at the apple, meaning you get to do your written response, and if that doesn't fully mitigate the government's concerns, you would move on to a hearing. Department of Energy says one or the other. You either do a written response or elect a hearing. So you might choose to go to the hearing and not actually do the written response, but you get to submit your written response as an exhibit for the hearing. So let's say you submit your statement of reasons and you don't win. Well, now you're going to get a notification, except for, as I mentioned, the Department of Energy. You're going to get a notification that the response to the statement of reasons didn't mitigate the government's concerns. And for a civilian, you're in most cases going to be able to elect to go to a hearing. If you're military, that was really your final decision, but you can elect a hearing, which is actually an appeal for a military member. But it's all a very similar process. Same guidelines apply, same rules. So you'll go to the hearing, and the hearing is your next step. The problem is it can take quite a while to schedule the hearing. You used to have to wait if you wanted a remote hearing and within 100 miles of your home or place of business, they would come to you. The judge and the department counsel would come to you and hold the hearing, but they would group people together, so it would take longer. You'd have to wait sometimes a year or more for your hearing. Now they want you to do the hearings remote or to go to a Doha facility. So it's quicker. So now you might wait anywhere from, say, 4 or 5 months to a year to have your hearing. If you're successful there, then you usually get a decision anywhere, depending on the judge, from maybe 1 month to 3 or 4 months after the hearing. You'll know if you won at the hearing or lost at the hearing. Once you get that decision, if you won, you're good, your clearance is good, nothing further to do, and you can just continue to work. If your clearance is denied, then you have an opportunity to submit an appeal. After you submit your appeal, department counsel will have time to submit their appeal, and then the panel is going to issue a decision. So it's a long story, but the short answer is anywhere from 2 months to maybe as long as 4 or 5 years for certain intelligence agencies that kind of slow roll the applications and really they have no reason to speed up the process because they don't need the applicant. They don't need the person looking for the job. So it really is a broad time range. But Department of Energy, they do a really good job of moving things along quickly. Their judges are on more of a strict timeline. There is a timeline laid out for every portion of the adjudication, and the judges are really, really good at sticking to that timeline. So Department of Energy is pretty quick, but the other agencies not so much.
So it sounded like in there that you had 2 options. You had either sending in your written response or attending the hearing. Is one better than the other? I mean, should I just write my statement and submit that? Or should I wait for the hearing? Because it sounds like it takes an absolutely long time sometimes for these hearings. Should I wait for the hearing and submit my writing then?
So it doesn't hurt to do a written response and attempt to mitigate the government's concerns that way, because you'll have an opportunity for a hearing later, and that is assuming you have both opportunities, both options. If you only get to pick one or the other, then it's almost always hearing. So you want to go to a hearing. The reason you want to go to a hearing is because the judge can't ask your stack of papers questions. There are going to be questions in the adjudicator's mind They're going to want to know information that you probably didn't include in your response to the statement of reasons. And the judge, they might have been department counsel in a previous life. They want to know the things that are going to lead them to believe whether you're trustworthy and reliable. You might not think those are the same things. So you always want to go to a hearing. You want to give the judge an opportunity to see you, to talk with you. Do you look responsible? Did you wear a suit to the hearing? Were you well dressed? Are you professional? Do you have a good appearance? If you do, that's going to work in your favor. Can you put mom on the stand? Can you put a coworker on the stand that's going to talk about your character and what a great job you do protecting classified information? Can you do those things at the hearing that you can't do in a written response? If you can do those things at a hearing, the hearing is almost always going to work in your favor.
As long as you ironed your shirt.
Shine your shoes, iron your shirt.
That's it. Like, make them look good.
That's right.
Well, I have two questions for you. So a lot of what we've talked about today is about, issuing your statement out there and putting in writing in your own words. But we know there's a lot of tools that exist out there today. AI. Would you recommend, or is it a good idea to go ahead and run your statements through some form of AI out there before submitting it? Or is that definitely a nay, nay, no, no?
So I'm going to sound like an old man here, but I haven't bought in on the AI experiment yet. And I'll tell you why. I know there's been some issues already with AI in court cases. I know of at least one study that I read about an AI program that actually created fake cases so that it had cases to cite to in the brief. I would steer clear of AI. This is a matter of national security. The thing about security clearance work that I think makes it a little cleaner and clearer than most court case type work is that you don't have to dig through hundreds or thousands of cases. You don't have to find, the perfect case in a certain state to make your argument. It's all black and white. The adjudicative guidelines, there's 13 of them. If you read them, it tells you what the government's concern is. Then the government tells you in the statement of reasons what the specific concern is related to that government concern. And then right below that section in the adjudicative guideline, it tells you what you can do to mitigate the concerns. So if you just follow those rules and you build mitigation and present it well, then you have a really good chance of mitigating the government's concerns if you can find mitigation that's outlined in those adjudicative guidelines. You don't have to kill yourself searching through hours of cases and case precedent and things like that. You can go to many of the cases are published. Department of Energy publishes their cases, and a lot of Doha cases get published as well. You can review those cases and find persuasive cases. They're not going to govern the decision like a Supreme Court case would, but you can include those cases and say, I found a similar case to mine. Here's the facts of that case. My facts are similar, and you should be consistent and render a similar decision and grant my security clearance. We do that in our hearings and in our responses to statement of reasons, but it's not absolutely necessary, and it's a lot less research than what you would have to do in a normal court case.
And I'm going to interject in here and just let everyone know that Tony keeps using the term Doha, and that means
Defense Office of Hearings and Appeals.
Just wanted to check.
So, yeah, Doha has judges, attorneys, what they call department counsel. It's not necessarily adversarial. It's really fact-finding. But department counsel, they are the attorney on the other side, and they will ask questions. The judge will ask questions as well at these hearings. I've only maybe had one or two hearings that have gotten kind of heated, and that's really because of the investigator, their approach, and some different things. Your department counsel and your judges are very professional. They do this all the time. It's not something that people should be concerned about. You shouldn't be afraid to go to a security clearance hearing. You should be willing to go and talk about your case with the judge and with department counsel because they really just want to know the facts of the case and they want to make the right decision. And if you show up and you're professionally dressed and articulate and you can talk through the issues, then there's a really good chance that you'll be able to keep or obtain your security clearance.
Wonderful. And because you're so full of great advice, I'm going to open it up and just ask you, is there anything else regarding security clearances that has recently come up that you think would be important to understand? And close us out today.
Sure. There's a couple of hot topics, I think, right now. One of them is still marijuana. I know we've been talking about it for quite a bit, but I was at a conference back in November, and I was actually talking to an attorney who holds a security clearance. And this attorney told me that he also owns a dispensary. So we talked through his duty to report and some other things, but you can't hold a security clearance and buy, sell, invest in marijuana. It is illegal. So for people out there who are intentionally buying stocks, intentionally investing in marijuana, people out there who hold the security clearance and work at or own a dispensary or are growing marijuana, things like that, you are purchasing, manufacturing, distributing marijuana, which is an illegal Schedule I substance, and you will have your security clearance revoked for it. So be very careful. If you find that your company is, maybe the 401k is investing in a company that is involved in marijuana, if you figure that out and you can take some type of action to stop that, that's okay. You haven't proactively sought out those investments. You're not doing it on purpose. It happens. Those are usually really easily mitigated. But if you own a dispensary and you have a security clearance, it's time to pick one, because you're probably not going to be able to do both. The law might change, but we've been talking about that for how many years? It hasn't changed yet. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing that I think is going to be a hot topic here in the near future, there's a lot about illegal immigration going on right now. And I think that that's going to be an issue. We had a recent case where one of our clients was a deportation officer, and his father, who lived in the same apartment complex, was actually here illegally. So he almost lost his security clearance. We were able, on second level review, to get that decision changed, and we were able to get a favorable decision on that one. But that's not always going to be the case. So be careful who you associate with. Be careful who's living in your home. You have some things to consider. It is very possible that if you report those individuals, you might bring attention on those individuals, and they might actually be deported as a result of that. So you've got something to consider. Do you want to hold a security clearance, or do you want to, marry this person that might be here illegally, or have your parents living in your house if they're here illegally? You've got some things to consider. If you decide you want to hold the security clearance, you have a duty to report that relationship and those individuals. So just something to consider moving forward. I think it's going to be an issue that's going to come to light quite a bit here in the near future.
Tony, as always, wonderful pleasure to have you on the show, to have you share so much information. Thank you again for joining the show.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Tony is just so fabulous. I love having him on the show. I am so glad that he is a partner with ClearedJobs.Net. I learn something new every time, but I actually love the reminder today that you need to self-report on many issues, and self-reporting, writing it out, is most important, but also writing it out so you have a record and it is your record, your accounting, versus, as he shared in the show, if you call somebody and tell them the story, their own past experiences are going to color their version of what you told them. So always self-report, and always self-report in writing, and not just I did something. Write it out in a brief and write it out what you did to mitigate it. Rachel, what about you?
No, I think you bring up a really good point that Tony mentioned in there. And it's just about taking accountability, doing it in a proactive way, but kind of on your own terms, where you're not just giving somebody a call and saying, hey, man, I messed up, but you're being deliberate, you're being intentional with how you're sharing that message. And just that good reminder that, things may seem convenient, or laws may have changed in cities or states, but they haven't changed at the federal level. So make good choices, friends. And I think a great choice that you can make is making sure that you are listening to us and all of our wonderful guests with all of their great advice. So it's so important to know about the issues that can impact your security clearance, and we appreciate you listening all the way to the end, in fact. So be sure to get out there and follow our podcast so you can learn even more and make good choices. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye.